Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at excerpts from Al-Qalam.pdf, the chapter of the pen from the Quran. The very first line invokes the power of the pen and the act of writing, which I have to admit immediately makes me want to know more. What's so special about the pen here?
Well, Al-Qalam actually means the pen in Arabic. It's the 68th chapter of the Quran. And yeah, the opening lines definitely set a tone of mystery and power. This chapter really delves into morality, faith, divine punishment, resisting temptation, all big, important themes.
It's fascinating how the chapter starts off by reassuring the prophet that he isn't insane, that a great reward awaits him. These verses, 2 to 4, make me think about how prophets throughout history have been accused of being madmen or heretics just for speaking truth to power.
That's a great observation. These verses of reassurance are actually a recurring theme in the Quran. You see, prophets often face rejection and accusations from those who disbelieve. So it's not just about comforting the prophet, but also affirming his character to the believers. It's a reminder that even the most righteous individuals can face opposition and be misunderstood.
Then in verses 8-14, there's a stark shift. It's almost like a warning, describing people we should avoid. Those who swear a lot, spread slander, love material wealth. Is this describing a specific type of person, or is it more symbolic?
It's interesting how vividly the Quran portrays these individuals, isn't it? I think it serves a couple of purposes. On one hand, it does offer practical advice. Be wary of those who exhibit these negative qualities. But on a deeper level, it's highlighting the inner struggle we all face, the desire for wealth, the tendency to gossip, the ease with which we can fall into bad habits. The Quran is asking us to examine ourselves and resist these temptations.
And that ties in with verse 14, where it talks about boasting about money and children. This seems like a universal theme, right? This idea that material wealth can be a distraction, maybe even a trap. Is that how we should interpret this?
Yes, absolutely. And it connects to a larger message in the Quran about the fleeting nature of worldly possessions. These verses are a reminder that true fulfillment comes not from what we accumulate, but from a relationship with God and striving for spiritual growth. Now, this brings us to one of the most captivating parts of the chapter, the parable of the garden in verses 17-33.
Yes, this parable immediately caught my attention too. It's about the owners of a lush garden who plan to harvest their fruits, but are prevented by a sudden calamity. They end up with nothing but devastation. What do you think is the deeper significance of this story?
This parable is brilliant in its symbolism. It goes beyond just material wealth. The garden represents anything we become overly attached to, be it possessions, status, or even relationships. The calamity shows how quickly things can change, reminding us not to take our blessings for granted. And it's not just about losing things, it's about the attitude we have towards them.
That's right. The gardeners initially tell the poor to stay away, emphasizing their greed. But then in verses 28-32, we see them regretting their actions and turning back to their Lord. What a powerful depiction of how adversity can lead to introspection and spiritual awakening. Does this suggest there's always an opportunity for redemption, even after making mistakes?
That's a very insightful question, and I think the answer lies in those verses where the gardeners acknowledge their wrongdoing and turn back to their Lord. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes God's mercy and forgiveness. This parable offers hope that even when we stray from the right path, we can always find our way back through sincere repentance and a change of heart. It's never too late. What stands out to you about the way the Quran uses storytelling to convey these deeper messages?
I think the stories are so effective because they make these abstract concepts relatable. We can all understand the feeling of losing something we value, the regret of making a bad decision. It allows us to connect with the message on a personal level. Now, after this parable, the chapter shifts gears again and directly addresses the disbelievers. Verses 35-41 pose a series of rhetorical questions that seem pretty pointed, almost like the text is challenging their skepticism.
Exactly. These questions are meant to provoke thought and challenge the disbelievers to really examine their own beliefs. The verses ask, do you have proof for your claims? Can you produce your own scriptures? It highlights the lack of substance behind their disbelief and emphasizes that faith should be based on reason and evidence, not blind denial.
And then in verse 42, the day of judgment is brought up, which adds a whole other layer to the discussion. It feels like a reminder that ultimately truth will prevail and those who deny it will be held accountable. Is this intended to instill a sense of urgency or fear or something else entirely?
It's interesting how you phrase that, a sense of urgency. I think that captures it well. The day of judgment isn't meant to be about fear-mongering. Rather, it serves as a powerful reminder that our actions have consequences. It encourages us to live a life that is aligned with our values and to strive for righteousness, knowing that we will eventually be held accountable for our choices.
Okay, so we've seen reassurance for the prophet, warnings against negativity and materialism, and a thought-provoking parable about the fleeting nature of worldly possessions. And now the text introduces a mysterious figure, the fellow of the fish, in verses 48-50. We only get a glimpse of this story, but it definitely piques my curiosity. What can you tell us about this figure and what they represent within the context of this chapter?
The fellow of the fish is a fascinating figure, and this brief mention in Al-Qalam actually alludes to a story that's elaborated upon in other Islamic traditions. The fellow is often identified as Prophet Jonah, and his story is one of immense hardship, despair, and ultimately deliverance through unwavering faith. I think placing this story here, after the discussion of the Day of Judgment, is really significant.
It does seem like there's a connection there. Both sections deal with facing consequences and finding redemption. Is this story meant to be a source of hope for believers, showing that even in moments of despair, divine grace is possible?
Precisely. The story of Jonah, or the fellow of the fish, as it's referred to here, reminds us of the importance of patience and trust in God's plan, even when things seem bleak. It's about recognizing that even when we make mistakes or face trials, there's always a chance to turn back to God, seek forgiveness, and find our way back to the right path. It's a powerful message of resilience and hope, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. It makes me wonder if this story wasn't explicitly spelled out here. Is the Quran encouraging us to seek out these additional stories and teachings, to go beyond just the verses themselves and explore the broader context of Islamic tradition?
That's a great point. The Quran often alludes to stories and events that are detailed in other Islamic texts, like the Hadith. This encourages readers to delve deeper into those traditions, to piece together the full picture, and to continuously expand their understanding. It's an invitation to engage in a lifelong journey of learning and discovery, rather than just passively absorbing information.
It's like the Quran is a springboard, propelling you to seek out more knowledge, to connect the dots and to see how all these different pieces fit together. It's not just about reading the words on the page, but about actively engaging with the text and its broader context. Now moving towards the end of the chapter. Verse 51 describes the disbelievers' reaction to the message. They mock, scoff, even call the prophet crazy. It's interesting how this almost seems to validate the message, like the stronger the resistance, the more powerful the truth must be.
That's a really astute observation. The Quran acknowledges that not everyone will accept its message. But despite the resistance, verse 52 declares that it is no less than a reminder to all the worlds. This is such a powerful statement about the universality and enduring relevance of the Quran's message. It's not just for one time or place, but for all of humanity.
And tying this back to the opening lines, with the emphasis on the pen and the act of writing, it really highlights how these truths are meant to be preserved and transmitted. It's like the pen itself becomes a symbol of knowledge and divine revelation, ensuring that this message transcends time and continues to resonate throughout history.
Absolutely. And if you think about the historical context, at the time of the Quran's revelation, writing was a relatively new and powerful technology. It allowed for the preservation and dissemination of knowledge in a way that was previously unimaginable. So invoking the pen in the very first line adds another layer of meaning to the chapter. It highlights the importance of preserving, sharing, and engaging with knowledge, both divine and worldly. Would you say this chapter has changed how you view the act of writing?
I think it has. It makes me appreciate the power of the written word in a new light. It's not just about putting words on paper. It's about capturing ideas, sharing stories, and transmitting knowledge that can have a profound impact on individuals and societies. This chapter has really made me think about the responsibility that comes with wielding a pen, both literally and figuratively. What are some of the key takeaways you hope our listener will glean from this deep dive into the chapter of the pen?
Well, there are so many, but if I had to choose a few, I'd say the importance of staying true to one's values, even in the face of opposition, the fleeting nature of material wealth and the need to prioritize spiritual growth, the power of repentance and divine mercy, and ultimately, the enduring relevance and universality of the Quran's message. This chapter is a reminder that even though it was revealed centuries ago, its themes and lessons still resonate deeply in our modern world.
I completely agree. It's amazing how these ancient verses can speak to our contemporary concerns and offer guidance for navigating the complexities of life. But I also love how the chapter ends, not with a definitive statement, but with this open-ended invitation to explore further.
Yes, and that brings me to the story of the fellow of the fish. We only get a brief glimpse of it here, but it's such a powerful reminder of the importance of patience, trust in God's plan, and the possibility of redemption even in moments of despair. What if we left our listener with a challenge to seek out the full story of the fellow of the fish and reflect on how it connects to their own life experiences?
That's a great idea. It encourages our listener to continue their exploration of the Quran and to see how these stories and teachings can be applied to their own lives. After all, that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? To not just read the words, but to internalize their meaning and allow them to guide us on our own unique spiritual journeys. Now, before we wrap up, I'm curious, is there a particular verse or passage in this chapter that resonated with you on a personal level?
That's a tough one. But if I had to choose, I think I'd go back to verse 52. But it's no less than a reminder to all the worlds. That line always strikes me with its sheer scope and power. It's a reminder that the Quran's message is not limited to any one group of people or time period. It speaks to the entirety of humanity and offers guidance for all who seek it. What about you? Was there a particular verse or passage that stood out to you?
I think for me it was the opening lines, invoking the pen and the act of writing. It's such a simple yet profound image that encapsulates the power of language, knowledge, and divine revelation. It reminds me that words have the ability to shape our thoughts, inspire our actions, and transmit wisdom across generations. And in a world where information is constantly bombarding us from all directions, I think it's more important than ever to be mindful of the words we choose, both those we consume and those we create.
That's beautifully said, and it brings us back full circle to the core message of this chapter, the power of the pen, the importance of seeking knowledge, and the enduring relevance of the Quran's teachings.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the themes of morality, faith, divine punishment, resisting temptation, the importance of seeking knowledge, and the universality of the Quran's message. But as you said, we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover in the chapter of the pen, and in the Quran as a whole.
Exactly. And I think the beauty of the Quran lies in its ability to continuously reveal new layers of meaning and understanding as we grow and evolve. It's a text that can be revisited again and again, each time offering fresh insights and perspectives.
So to our listener, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking deeper understanding.
Happy exploring.
The chapter of the pen has been a fascinating journey, and I have to say, I'm leaving with a lot more questions than answers.
That's a great sign. The Quran is meant to provoke thought and reflection, not to provide all the answers on a silver platter. The journey of understanding and interpretation is an ongoing process.
And I think that's what makes it so compelling. It's not just a book to be read and put away. It's a living text that continues to speak to us across centuries and cultures.
Absolutely. And as we've discussed, the chapter of the pen, with its emphasis on the written word, is a powerful reminder of how knowledge can be preserved and transmitted, even in the face of opposition and the passage of time.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, I want to go back to that challenge you posed earlier. What advice would you give our listener as they embark on their quest to learn more about the story of the fellow with the fish?
Well, first, I'd encourage them to remember that there are multiple interpretations and perspectives on this story, just as there are with many aspects of the Quran. Don't be afraid to explore different sources, to compare and contrast, and to form your own understanding. Second, keep in mind the context in which the story is presented in the chapter of the pen. How does it relate to the themes of patience, resilience, and divine mercy that we've been discussing? And finally, don't just read the story passively. Put yourself in the fellow's shoes. What lessons can you draw from his experiences? How can those lessons be applied to your own life?
That's such great advice. It's a reminder that learning isn't just about acquiring knowledge, but about engaging with it on a personal level, allowing it to shape our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Exactly. And as you delve deeper into the story of the fellow of the fish, I'm sure you'll discover even more layers of meaning and insight that you hadn't considered before.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to bid farewell to the chapter of the pen, at least for now. But I have a feeling we'll be revisiting its wisdom and insights for many years to come.
Me too. It's a chapter that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
To our listener, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive as much as we have. May your exploration of the Quran continue to be a source of inspiration, guidance, and wonder.
Happy exploring.
And that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.